be here. June is National Iced Tea Month, so this is the perfect topic to be talking about tonight. I love sharing my passion and knowledge for tea with everyone that I meet, and I hope that tonight's program will inspire you to try a different type of tea or make your own iced tea at home. Uh, you should have received some of the recipes that were sent along with the Zoom link. So you can try those, and there's also steeping instructions too. So tonight I'm going to talk about four main types of tea and the herbal category, the history of iced tea in America, and some iced tea traditions from around the world. And I'll talk about two different brewing methods for making homemade iced tea. And I'll have some quizzes, so feel free to type the answers in the chat, or you can, I guess Nadia will maybe unmute you if you want to answer them when we get to the quizzes. And then if you have any questions, I'll answer them at the end. So I'm going to share my screen now. And if everyone can see that, just give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. Thank you, Jane. So my name is Nina Androsky, and I'm an ambassador for an online tea company called Delightful Tea, and they sell organic loose leaf tea. And that's mostly what I'll be talking about tonight is loose leaf tea, but everything that I mentioned can also be applied to tea bags. So tea is the most consumed beverage in the world after water. Most people think that it's coffee, but it's actually tea. And I like to tell people that if we hadn't dumped all of the tea in the Boston Harbor, we would be a tea drinking nation instead of a coffee drinking nation. But it actually became an act of patriotism to drink coffee over tea back in the colonial period. Approximately 85% of the tea consumed in America is iced, and this high percentage is basically refers to the iced tea that you can buy in the supermarket, like Snapple. But later in the program, I'll tell you how you can brew your own iced tea at home, which is fresher. It hasn't been sitting on a shelf for however, who knows how long, and it has more health benefits and antioxidants than the store-bought kind. So there are four main types of tea. There's white tea, green tea, oolong, and black, and all of them make excellent iced teas. All tea comes from the exact same plant, and that the botanical name is the Camellia sinensis. When I first started studying about tea, I thought that there was a white tea plant and a black tea plant, but that's not the case. All those types of teas come from exactly the same plant. So if you've ever heard of anything called herbal tea, that is actually not real tea because it doesn't contain any tea leaves from the Camellia sinensis plant. So what is herbal tea then? It's a caffeine-free beverage made of the infusion of, it could be herbs, berries, dried flowers, roots, seeds, bark in boiling water. And the French term for that is an herbal tisane. And herbal teas were basically used for traditionally used for medicinal purposes. So for example, chamomile is good for a baby that has a teething issue. It helps with an upset stomach. Ginger is good for an upset stomach. Peppermint as well. Chamomile helps with sleep. So a lot of these herbal infusions were used as medicine. And these photos here show all the ranges of different types of herbal infusions that you can make. Ginger, cinnamon, hibiscus, rose hips, elderberry. There's one called rooibos, which is a red herb from South Africa. So you can basically make an herbal infusion of almost anything, and you can have it hot or cold, and but just remember, it's really not tea. The tea plant originated in China, and this plant loves to grow in hot, humid, high altitude areas. So this is the perfect environment for that. There's a legend, a Chinese legend that says tea as a beverage was discovered by accident 5,000 years ago. So the story goes that the emperor at the time, Shen Nong, was sitting under a wild tea tree, and he was boiling water, and some leaves from the tea tree were dried, and they fell into his pot of boiling water, and he tried the beverage and he thought it was very restorative. And so he encouraged his people to start drinking this beverage. The tea plant eventually moved on from China through the process of travel and trade. And today, the top 5 tea producing countries are China, India, Sri Lanka, Turkey, and Kenya. And if you've ever heard of Ceylon Tea, which is Ceylon, that the name of the country of Sri Lanka now used to be called Ceylon. So that's where you get the name Ceylon Tea. In the late 18th century, the tea plant came to America, and a French botanist and explorer named Andre Micho brought a little clipping of the tea plant over to South Carolina, and he planted it there, and it thrived because down in that area, it's very humid and it's a great environment for growing the tea plant. There is actually a tea garden right outside of Charleston that I visited a couple years ago that still have some of the original tea plants growing from the original clippings that the French botanist brought over. And if you're ever, once we get back to traveling, if you're ever in that area, I would highly recommend visiting this tea garden. You get to go on a trolley and go out into the tea fields and see how the plants are growing. At the end, you go into the tea factory so you can see how the tea bags are made. And they also have a great gift shop and unlimited samples of hot tea and iced tea. And this tea garden is actually owned by the Bigelow Tea Company. So if you've ever bought Bigelow Tea in the supermarket, they bought this tea garden several years ago. So they now own and operate it. So for premium loose leaf tea, only the top 2 inches of the tea plant is picked by hand. So these people that pick the tea leaves are trained to pick only the top 2 leaves and a bud. And the most concentration of antioxidants occurs in the top 2 inches of the plant. So you're getting a lot of health benefits and the best quality tea when it is picked by hand. On large tea gardens, they do have machines pick the tea. So you're definitely getting more than that. But the tea is still fine. But for the higher quality tea, it's the best picked by hand. So you might be wondering, if all tea comes from the same plant, then how do we actually get the different types of teas that I mentioned, the white, the green, the oolong, and the black? And that's actually through the process a chemical process called oxidation. So basically, oxidation is how long the tea leaves are allowed to be exposed to oxygen once the leaves have been picked. And oxidation occurs when enzymes in the tea leaf interact with oxygen and they start to turn the tea leaves brown in the same way that an apple or a banana will start to turn brown when it's exposed to air. How long the tea leaves are allowed to oxidize before the oxidation process is stopped manually determines the type of tea that you will get, the end result. There's a term in the tea industry called Kilgreen. It's also called fixation. And that basically means to stop the tea leaf oxidation at a desired level using gentle heating methods. So you can see in this picture, this gentleman has a wok, and under the wok is a fire, and he's gently tossing the leaves in this wok to stop the oxidation process because he's making a green tea. This chart here shows the oxidation process for each type of tea. So you can see that white tea is the least oxidized of all the teas. It basically just after the leaves are picked gets quickly steamed to stop the oxidation process. It gets to be dried in the sun, and then you get your end product. So it really doesn't go through a lot of processing at all. As you move on, you can see that the process gets more complicated. And as we get to the black tea, you can see that has really gone through a lot to get to the final product. And black tea is considered the most oxidized out of all of the teas. So I have a tea quiz for you. If you want to type it in the chat, or I think you can unmute yourself, I'm not sure. What is the name of the tea plant? What is the name of the chemical reaction that creates different types of teas? Can you name one of the top 5 tea producing countries? In what state did the first tea plants grow in America? And true or false, herbal beverages contain tea leaves from the tea plant? So I'm going to check the chat. Sherry got them all right. And Jane. The name of the tea plant is the Camellia sinensis. Oxidation is the chemical reaction that creates the different types of teas. You could have picked China, Sri Lanka, Turkey, India, or Kenya as one of the top 5 tea producing countries. South Carolina is where the tea plant was brought over by the French botanist. And that is false. So herbal beverages do not contain any tea leaves. So you guys did great. So now I'm going to talk about iced tea. Now that you have a little history of tea in general, I'm going to get into specifically iced tea. So the first iced teas in America were spiked. They had alcohol in them, and they were called tea punches, and they were made with green tea, not black tea, because at the time, about 1/3 of the tea exported to the States was green tea. So, well, this was actually colonial times. And from 1839, I was able to find a recipe, which is the oldest American tea punch recipe, and it appeared in a book called The Kentucky Housewife. And the recipe goes like this. You make 1.5 pints of very strong tea in the usual manner. And again, this is with green tea. Strain it and pour it boiling on 1 1/4 pound loaf of loaf sugar. Add a pint of rich sweet cream, and then stir in gradually a bottle of claret or champagne. And you can heat it or serve it cold in glass cups. And I just wanted to point out here that if you, there's a couple of tips when you're brewing tea, especially green tea and white tea. Now, this recipe says to use boiling water, but with green tea and white tea, because they are the least oxidized of the teas, the leaves are very delicate. And if you were to put boiling water on top of these two types of teas, you would scorch the leaves and it would become very bitter. So if you're brewing green or white tea, whether it's loose leaf or tea bags, you want to let your water boil and then let it cool off maybe a couple minutes and then pour that onto your tea leaves. And then you should not get a bitter cup of tea. The other little tip is you don't want to steep it for too long. So for white and green tea, you would only steep it about 1 to 3 minutes. For black tea and herbals, you would use full boiling water and brew it about 5 to 7 minutes. And then oolong's kind of a weird one in the middle, but depending on, oolong can be sort of a green tea or more towards a black tea. So you would just want to find out how the tea master made this tea and then follow the instructions on the packet if you were to try oolong. So the second oldest recipe for iced tea that I was able to find is a non-alcoholic version, and that appeared in a cookbook from 1879, and that cookbook was called the Housekeeping in Old Virginia Cookbook. And I actually went online and I found an old copy of the book that I'll show at the end. It's definitely not a vintage copy or anything like that. It's a reprint. But I found this recipe in the book, and the recipe says, after scalding the teapot, put into it 1 quart of boiling water and 2 teaspoons of green tea. So it's non-alcoholic, but we're still using green tea at this time. If wanted for supper, do this at breakfast. At dinner time, strain without stirring through a tea strainer into a pitcher. Let it stand till tea time and then pour into decanters, leaving the sediment in the bottom. Fill the goblets with ice. Add some sugar and some lemon to correct the astringency. So again, this recipe, I don't think at the time they knew to not use boiling water on green tea or white tea because they're using sugar and lemon to make up for the bitterness. But as I just mentioned, if you are brewing white or green, definitely don't use full boiling water and don't steep it for 8 hours, like it says here. If wanted for supper, do this at breakfast. So don't steep it that long, or you're definitely going to get a bitter cup of tea. So the next recipe I was able to find for iced tea was from 1884 in Mrs. Lincoln's Boston cookbook. And this is for pre-sweetened iced tea using black tea, finally, which is what we're used to today when we think of iced tea. And this is the closest to sweet tea that we find in restaurants today. So this recipe says, make the tea by the first receipt, which I looked up just means recipe. Strain it from the grounds and cool it. When ready to serve, put 2 cubes of block sugar in a glass, half fill with broken ice, add a slice of lemon, and fill the glass with the cold tea. So if you were to Google the history of iced tea or how iced tea was invented, you're probably going to find this information, that it was invented at the World's Fair in 1904. But as I did a little more digging, I realized that it's more accurate to say that iced tea was popularized at the World's Fair, not invented. The story goes that there was an a man named Richard Bleckenden, and he was an English gentleman and also an Indian tea trader. And at the fair, he was sampling hot tea. And that particular day, it was super hot, and no one wanted to drink a hot beverage when it was so hot out. So he got the bright idea to quickly cool down his hot tea samples, and everyone just went crazy over this new iced tea. And so that's why he's credited with being the inventor of iced tea. But as you can see from what I've just told you, their iced tea had been around for quite a while before that. So there are, after the World's Fair, there are three things that really solidified iced tea's future in America. And one is the Prohibition from 1920 to 1933. And people were looking for alternatives to the illegal beer and wine and alcohol. And so they started drinking a lot of iced tea. Iced tea's popularity also mirrored the development of refrigeration. So cooling devices such as the ice house, the ice box, and the commercial manufacture of pure ice were becoming widely available at the time, which helped to boost the popularity of iced tea as well. And then finally, tea itself became more affordable, so the average person could buy it. So as you can see from its rich history, iced tea is truly an American beverage. The Brits don't really understand why we drink iced tea, because I like this quote here: they really never have any hot days in England. But iced tea is definitely an American thing, as far as the Brits are concerned. But as I'm going to get into shortly, iced tea, there's a lot of iced tea traditions around the world. So we're not the only country that it's popular in. So here in America, sweet tea is basically something that they drink in the southern states. So when you order an iced tea in the South, you're going to get it pre-sweetened. Here in the North, when you order an iced tea, it's usually unsweetened, and you add your sugar packets to it. And in the movie Sweet Magnolias, Dolly Parton is known to say that sweet tea is the house wine of the South, because everyone drinks it all the time. And I was able to find this image of the United States, and there was actually kind of a divide line where, as I mentioned, if you order an iced tea in the orange states, they're going to bring it to you already pre-sweetened. And it's black tea that's been brewed very strong, and sugar is added while the tea is still hot, so it can dissolve. All the sugar can dissolve. But up here in the North, when you order an iced tea, it's going to become to your table unsweetened, and you're going to add whatever type of sweetener that you want. But I thought this was funny because there's a sweet tea line. Some other popular iced teas that you may have heard of: there's an Arnold Palmer, which is basically a mixture of iced tea and lemonade. And this was apparently invented by a golfer who asked for some lemonade to be added to his iced tea. And this is also called a half and half. There's something called an iced matcha latte. And basically, matcha is green tea that has been ground up into a powder form. So when you are drinking matcha, you're actually ingesting the whole tea leaf. And as a result, matcha is considered a superfood, and it's supposed to be very healthy for you and have about 60 times the antioxidants as spinach. And how you would make this iced matcha latte is you would use slightly less than boiling water and put a scoop of the matcha powder, and you would use a whisk to whisk it and get it very frothy, and then you would pour it over ice, and it's nice and refreshing this time of year. So if you've ever heard of a Long Island iced tea, there's actually no tea in it at all. It's 100% alcoholic beverage, but when all of these things are blended together, it tastes just like a sweet iced tea. And it was not invented in Long Island at all, but in Tennessee. And there was a man there named Old Man Bishop. And during the Prohibition era, he was said to create this illegal beverage, and he named it after the 4-mile strip of land that he lived on in the Holston River in Tennessee. So like the Long Island that he lived on. So yeah, you can see from the ingredients, it does not contain any brewed tea at all. If you've heard of kombucha tea, this is a light fizzy fermented drink. So it's made with brewed green tea or black tea and some sweetener and other flavorings, but it's fermented, similar to yogurt, and it's considered a probiotic drink. So it's good for your gut bacteria. My dad actually drinks just a little kind of shot glass size of kombucha every day for his gut, kind of similar to taking a probiotic pill. So I wanted to go over some iced teas around the world. So in Thailand, if you've ever been to a Thai restaurant and had Thai food, sometimes on the menu you can also get a Thai iced tea to go along with it. And it's called chai yen. And basically it's very, very strongly brewed black tea with sugar, sweetened condensed milk, and spices like cinnamon, cardamom, ginger, anise, tamarind. And it's an orange color because they add orange food coloring to it. And I'm just going to check the chat because I don't know if there's a question. Oh, Sherry loves the Thai iced teas. And Thai food can be a little spicy. So this drink actually helps to cool down your palate after you've eaten all the spicy food. In Taiwan, bubble tea is really popular. And this drink originated in the 1980s and spread throughout Southeast Asia before making its way to the United States. And bubble tea is tea combined with sugar syrup and powdered milk. And the bubbles on the bottom of the glass there are actually tapioca balls soaked in a sugary syrup. And you can see that the straws are really wide so that you can suck up the balls on the bottom of the glass, because you can eat those too. The national drink of Malaysia is something called Tay Tariq, and it means pulled tea. And it's basically black tea, sugar, and condensed milk that's poured through the air between two glasses or two vessels, and they keep pouring it back and forth and back and forth so that it gets frothy, and then you can drink it hot or cold. And skilled artists take years to learn the art of tea pulling, and they never spill a drop, I've heard. They even have tea pulling competitions where these tea artists show off their skills to music and dance moves. So I found a video that I want to share with everybody. I hope it works. And this is, you'll see some different examples of people doing the tea pulling. I thought that was pretty cool, especially when they were showing it in slow motion. So another type of iced tea comes from Mexico, and this is called Agua Fresca de Jamaica, and it's actually just hibiscus flowers that have been steeped in boiling water. And this would actually be considered an herbal infusion. So it's not true tea because it's just dried flowers, but it's considered an iced tea. It tastes very tart, like cranberry juice, and it's typically served with the midday meal, the siesta in Mexico. And it's high in vitamin C and very high in antioxidants. In Hong Kong, there's something called pantyhose tea or silk stocking tea. And this is a mixture of different types of black teas combined with evaporated or condensed milk and served over ice. And you can see that the gentleman is straining the tea through a long filter, which looks like a stocking. And he does this multiple times. And this is how it gets its name because of this filter. So it's called pantyhose or silk stocking tea. And the final beverage also contributes to the name because the color looks like a nude stocking color. So I have another tea quiz for everybody. So what's in the Arnold Palmer? Where did the Long Island iced tea originate? What are the bubbles in bubble tea? What is matcha? And true or false, Sir Thomas Lipton is considered the inventor of iced tea. Sherry's getting them all. An Arnold Palmer is lemonade and iced tea, also called a half and half. The Long Island iced tea did not originate in Long Island, but in Tennessee. The bubbles in bubble tea are tapioca pearls. Matcha is green tea that's been pulverized into a powder form. And Sir Thomas Lipton is not considered the inventor of iced tea, but Richard Bleckenden, and he was at the World's Fair. So I've been talking a lot about loose leaf tea. But I wanted to talk about tea bags because everything that I'm saying tonight can also be applied to tea bags. So here we have another story of how tea bags were accidentally invented in 1904, and Thomas Sullivan is given the credit for inventing the tea bag. And he was a New York tea merchant, and one time he decided to, instead of send his loose leaf tea samples out in boxes, he started sending them out in silk bags. And when his customers got them, they dunk them in hot water, and because they thought that's what they should do with them. And that's he people loved the convenience of it, and they reported back to him and they said, we love these tea bags and we want more of them. And so uh, that's why he's given credit for inventing the tea bag. However, when I dug a little deeper, I found out that in 1901, two women named Roberta Lawson and Mary McLaren of Wisconsin filed a patent for an invention a lot like the modern tea bag. So I like to say that the tea bag was invented on purpose by two women. So just wanted to quickly go over what's the difference between loose leaf tea and a tea bag. And the main difference is just the size of the tea leaves. So loose leaf tea, you're getting the whole entire leaf, whereas in a tea bag, they have to cut up the tea leaves so that they can actually fit in the tea bag. With loose leaf tea, you can actually reuse the tea leaves multiple times. So in the morning, I'll steep a cup of green tea, and if I want another one a couple hours later, I can actually use the same tea leaves. But I wouldn't recommend using them the next day because they'll start to grow bacteria. So you want to just use the leaves within the same day. With loose leaf tea, because there isn't a tea bag to constrain the leaves when they're brewing, the loose leaf tea is you get more aroma and flavor, and more minerals and vitamins come out because the tea leaf is allowed to expand fully. You can also make your own tea bag with loose leaf tea, and I'll show you at the end. I have paper tea filters that you can just fill yourself. But even, the tea bags from the store are perfectly fine. The tea, you'll still get a good cup of tea from a store-bought tea bag. But I like the loose leaf tea, and I encourage people to try it, even if they just try it once, just to see the difference. So there are two ways to make homemade iced tea, and one is the cold brew method and the other is the hot brew method. And either one you do, you're getting really fresh iced tea. The iced tea that's been in the stores has been sitting on the shelf for whoever knows how long, and who knows when they brewed it. And so if you're able to brew iced tea freshly and make it yourself, it really does taste better and has more antioxidants and health benefits. So the hot brew method is basically the same way you would make a cup of hot tea, but instead of, for hot tea, you would use 1 teaspoon per 8-ounce cup of water, or 1 tea bag per 8-ounce cup of water. But for iced tea, you want to double that, because you're going to be adding ice to it, and which is going to dilute it. So you want to make it a little bit stronger to begin with. So with the hot brew method, you just want to remember to use the correct water temperature which I had mentioned before. For green and white tea, you use less than boiling water. For herbals and black, you use full boiling water. And then oolong's that one in the middle that you just want to check the package if you were going to try oolong one time. And then just be mindful of the steeping time for each type of tea, because each type of tea does have its own steeping time. In general, white and green is about 1 to 3 minutes, and the blacks and the herbals are about 5 to 7 minutes. If you steep them too long, it will become bitter. You want to let your hot brew cool off to room temperature before putting it in the refrigerator, because it can become cloudy, but it's still fine to drink. But some people prefer a very clear iced tea. And you also want to add your sweetener while it's brewing, while it's still hot, so that the sugar or whatever sweetener you use can dissolve fully. If you do want to try using loose leaf tea, you just need a couple of tea tools, and one is a teaspoon. You need some sort of infuser. I like to use, as shown in the picture here, an infuser basket. You may have a tea ball, a stainless steel tea ball. You can use a kitchen strainer. And then the paper tea filters. You can make your own tea bag with the loose leaf tea. You need your teapot, a pitcher, or a mug. I recommend fresh filtered water versus tap water. It tastes a little bit better. A timer, and then your loose leaf tea. So it may look intimidating to try and brew a cup of loose leaf tea, but once you get into the rhythm of it's really doesn't take much time, and I think you'll find that it does taste better. So the cold brew method is super simple. You would just, again, double the amount of tea bags or loose leaf tea that you're using, and you would put the tea bags or the loose leaf tea directly into a pitcher with cold water, and then you put it in your refrigerator overnight, or 8 hours minimum, and you let it do its thing. And you don't have to worry about it oversteeping, because the cold water doesn't make it bitter. It just doesn't. When with the hot water, the tea leaves are really extracting all of the goodness and nutrients very quickly. But the cold brew is a slow, gentle method. So even though I just said don't brew green tea for more than 1 to 3 minutes, and now I'm saying you can keep it in your refrigerator overnight, that's because you're using the cold water. And you will find that it tastes a little bit different than the hot brew method. So you might want to try to experiment and try out both methods. So I hope I'm inspiring you to try making some homemade iced tea, and try some other types of teas besides black tea, and maybe try some herbal infusions. Instead of white sugar, maybe try a splash of fruit juice or coconut water as your sweetener, or honey, or you can add some of those flavored seltzers to make a sparkling iced tea. But what's great about the homemade iced tea is you can really control the sugar. And herbal infusions, I find, are really good, really without any sweetener at all. If I'm making like a blueberry, hibiscus, or any sort of flowery tea or herbal infusion, I don't even really need any sweetener. You can try experimenting with herbs and spices. You can use mint, mash it lightly by muddling it to release most of the flavor. You can try lavender. adding some lemon wedges. You can try some frozen or fresh fruits. If I have berries that are going bad, I like to pop them in the freezer, and then I will throw them into my glass of iced tea. I also like to make tea popsicles, and you got a recipe for this when you signed up for the presentation tonight. And you use the hot brew method for this. And if you want to make the half and half looking one in the middle, you would just fill up the popsicle mold with half first and then freeze it of the one flavor, and then take it out and fill it up with the next flavor and then put it back in the freezer. And then that's how you would get the two-toned one. You can also add fresh fruits. You can make them creamy and add coconut milk or almond milk or yogurt. But you can use tea in many culinary things. There's even matcha ice cream. It can, there's more things you can do with tea than just drink it. So when I make iced tea, I like to actually drink it out of little cute mason jars, and I bought some striped straws at the dollar store, and I like to just make it cute and fun when I drink different iced teas or herbal infusions. So I hope these photos and these tips are inspiring you a little bit. So in general, to go over a basic overview, all tea comes from the same plant, and that's the Camellia sinensis. There are 4 main types of tea, and all of them make really great, refreshing iced teas. And that is white tea, green tea, oolong, and black. And now you know that herbal tea is really not true tea, but it's still, the herbals taste great iced as well. The level of oxidation determines the tea type. There are 2 brewing methods for making iced tea, the cold brew and the hot brew. And like I said, I encourage you to try both and see which one you like better. And homemade iced tea has the same health benefits as the hot tea. So it's great to make it yourself, so it's freshly brewed and you can control the sugar. So I encourage you to, during this month of June, which is National Iced Tea Month, to try making some homemade iced tea. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. And if you have any questions, please email me. My email is teatimewithnina@aol.com. And if you wanted to check out my website where we sell organic loose leaf teas and herbals, it's delightfultasters.com/Nina. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I'm going to stop my PowerPoint now. And thank you, Jane. I'm glad you learned a lot. I love teaching people about tea. It's a passion of mine. I'll stop anyone on the street and chat with them about tea.
I want to thank you, Nina, for, coming out and speaking with us tonight. I know it's a smaller group today, but I think that this was a great comprehensive program, and I'm glad that everyone got a little bit more tips on how to make their tea a little different.
Thank you, everybody. I think Oh, Sherry came to the hot tea too. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Sherry.
Thank you, everybody. And I hope everyone that watches the recording gets a lot out of it too. And I inspire you to make some iced tea yourself this summer, and stay cool, everybody. Yeah, I'll post. Let me post my website.
And I'm like I said earlier in the presentation, do you plan on sending up a follow-up email to everyone who registered, even if they didn't attend? And I'll include the email address and your website as well. So if anybody didn't catch it the second time, I'll get it the third time.
Great. I think I just did that privately, so I might. That's to everybody. Okay.
And I think if nobody has any questions, I think we're gonna end it for tonight.
Okay.
Anybody has any questions? All right. And again, thank you, Nina, so much.
Thank you.
So much. And we loved having you in January. Love having you again in June. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And have a
Good
good
night,
night.
everybody.